Hello, everyone. Here, we'll be telling you some scary horror stories. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before you start, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as well as tell me where you're from and what time you're watching. Now, get comfy and prepare for some spooky tales.
Story 1.
The chill of a New Jersey night was biting, even in the early hours of that Saturday morning. Around 1 a.m., I found myself alone on Route 542, the familiar road winding through endless woods. The only light came from my Jeep's headlights, slicing through the darkness. It was a route I knew well, a shortcut to town, but tonight, the familiar landscape felt eerily silent. Not a single car was in sight. Then, in the distance, I saw a figure standing by the side of the road. As I approached, I saw a hand rise, a thumb extended. A hitchhiker. My heart hammered in my chest. I had no idea if I should stop, but something compelled me to slow down to get a better look. He was young, maybe 28, his features obscured by the hood of a gray sweatshirt. He wore blue jeans, a common enough sight, but the air around him felt heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. In a moment of poor judgment, I pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked, "Where you headed, friend?" His voice was deep and gravelly. "Just up the road." "Hop in," I offered, trying to sound casual. He moved slowly, his movements hesitant, as he entered the Jeep. The doors on a Wrangler are notoriously tight. As he attempted to close the door, it wouldn't latch. "Oh," I said. "The door didn't close." "Try slamming it shut. These doors are tricky." His reaction was unsettling. He turned his head slowly, fixated on me, and then took a beat, a long, heavy beat, before slamming the door shut. My gut was churning, my instincts screaming at me. I should have driven away then. I should have ignored the pleas in his eyes that were somehow both desperate and calculating. But I didn't. I pressed on the gas, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline as my Jeep sped down the road. "How far did you say you were going?" I asked, trying to make conversation. But there was only silence. He was staring at me. His eyes, hidden in the shadows of his hood, seemed to pierce through the darkness. I glanced away, my skin prickling. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "You know, I've been thinking. I've been wondering if it's worth it. If it's all worth it." "Worth it?" I echoed, my heart pounding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, a large red blade glinting under the headlights. My stomach plummeted. "I've been carrying this with me," he said, his voice emotionless, "waiting for the right time." The words were a chilling confirmation of the fear I had been trying to ignore. "Put that away," I demanded, my voice a strained whisper. He ignored me, his gaze fixed on me. "Pull over," he said, "next to that sign." I did as I was told, stopping beside a speed limit sign. The night air was filled with the rustle of leaves, a sound suddenly amplified in my ears, making the silence even more deafening. Then, I saw the glint of the knife again, this time on his wrist. He began to cut himself, the blade slicing through his skin, the crimson line of his wound adding to the 3 other scars already there. He let out a guttural groan, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You need to get out of my car," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "Get out," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "I want to show you something." I was trapped. He raised the knife, the glint reflecting in the darkness. "Just get out for a second," he said, his voice a low growl. "There's something I want you to see behind that sign." I knew I had to play it cool, to buy myself time. "Okay," I said, trying to sound calm. "Let's go." I opened the door, leaving it ajar, and raised my hands in surrender. I backed away slowly as he followed. The moment his back was to the car, I leaped back in, slammed the door shut, threw the Jeep into gear, and roared away. I didn't dare look back. I felt the icy grip of terror as the engine roared, the wind whipping through my hair, the scent of gasoline filling my nostrils. I didn't stop until I was home, my heart pounding in my chest, the image of that red blade seared into my memory. I was alive, but the experience had shaken me to my core. It was a harsh reminder that even on the quietest, most desolate roads, there were things lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. It was a reminder that sometimes the only safe course of action is to speed right past them, never looking back.
Story 2.
Nikki, an old family friend, told me this story countless times when I was a kid. It was one of those life lessons she'd share, urging me to keep it in mind as I grew up. I've never forgotten it. Every time I think about hitchhiking, her story comes to mind, and probably always will. It even makes me feel a little uneasy when I think about it, to be honest. Nikki was about the same age as my dad, so this was back in the early 80s. She was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s. She's one of those genuinely kind souls, always willing to help anyone in need. I can't imagine her being anything but that, even when she was younger. So, I totally see her doing this. She was driving into the city, a 2-hour drive from our town. She saw a man walking on the side of the road. As she got closer, he turned and, in a classic hitchhiker move, stuck out his arm and thumb. Nikki, bless her heart, pulled over and asked if he needed a ride. She told me he was polite, though a little shy, when he asked for a lift into the city. Nikki smiled and opened the passenger door for him. He tossed his bag in the back seat and buckled up. They had a pleasant conversation for most of the trip, talking about friends, news, and other things. Just light-hearted chatter. Nikki felt like they were getting along well. She even bought him dinner at the pit stop, a diner about halfway there. She said he seemed flustered and awkward when she paid, but they had talked about money and how he was really strapped for cash, which was why he was hitchhiking. Eventually, they continued their journey. As soon as they got to the city, he thanked her profusely for the ride and the meal, asking to be dropped off downtown. Before getting out, he asked for Nikki's phone number so he could get in touch later. Nikki was happy to connect with her new friend and wrote it down for him. She drove off, feeling good about doing a good deed. Now, I'm sorry if you were expecting something creepy to happen by now, but this is what freaked me out as a kid. How everything seemed to work out so well. Nikki gets this crease in her forehead and a strange look in her eye when she tells me this next part. A week later, she got a call from the same man. He didn't give her a chance to say hello. He told her she should thank God she was raised so well because when he first got in the car, he had planned to rape and murder her once they reached the pit stop. He was going to steal her car, dump her body in a ditch further down the road, and go on his merry way. But after she talked to him so kindly and even treated him to dinner with a smile on her face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He couldn't live with himself if he did that to such a nice lady. His last words on the phone were, "Please, Nikki, please never ever pick up another hitchhiker." Then he hung up. Nikki never got another call from him. When she tried calling back, she just heard a payphone ringing. From that story, I learned something important. I'm going to take that man's advice and never ever pick up a hitchhiker.
Story 3.
It was 3 months after my 16th birthday in 2005 when I got my first car, a used '99 Toyota Camry. A warm Saturday night found me headed to a big party at one of my friend Alex's friends' houses. I knew I wouldn't be in any shape to drive home, so we carpooled with Alex's girlfriend, Brianna. We lived in rural Virginia, which meant fewer big parties, but when one came up, it was a big deal. Everyone went. The house was about 5 to 10 minutes away, and while I knew the guy who lived there, we weren't exactly friends. The whole drive, we took the same winding 2-lane highway through the woods. The house itself was off the main road, and the highway stretched out on either side for miles. It was a tiny house, typical for the area, but the party was outside since the closest neighbors were far enough away that noise wasn't a problem. I'll skip ahead to the part where Brianna, our designated driver, had to leave suddenly because of a family emergency. Alex said it was fine, that we'd figure out a ride home. Fast forward a couple of hours and a few more drinks, and I was barely able to stand. It was almost 2 in the morning, and I knew it was time to go. I started looking for Alex, but he was nowhere to be found. Everyone else seemed to have left too. I could hardly think straight, but I was furious. I thought Alex had just left without me. I asked to use the party host's phone and dialed Alex's number, but after 2 tries, I gave up. I realized I shouldn't be waking his family up, so I just stood there, dizzy and confused. I didn't know what to do. I stepped out onto the road and started walking home. I knew it would take at least half an hour, maybe even an hour in my condition. After about 15 minutes, I saw the faint glow of headlights approaching from behind. Excited, I lifted my arm and stuck out my thumb. The car slowed down and stopped right next to me. The guy driving a '98 Ford Explorer rolled down his window and asked where I was headed. I told him my house was just down the road, past the turn, but I was probably slurring my words. He chuckled and told me to get in. I thanked him and hopped in the truck. I was exhausted and barely registering anything he was saying, but I was close to passing out. That's exactly what happened. I remember very little about being in that truck. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the moving vehicle. The guy glanced at me and left without a word. Looking around, I realized we were on a road I didn't recognize. I nervously asked where we were going, and he just replied, "So, what were you doing out this late anyway?" It was a rude awakening. I was scared. You can let me out anywhere," I said, but he just said, "No." I felt sick to my stomach. I actually thought I was going to throw up. I started gagging, getting more nauseous by the second. The driver took his eyes off the road to look at me, and that's when I had my idea. I turned toward him, still gagging. He leaned back a little and slowed down the car. Thank God I had been drinking so much because I finally threw up, all over his lap. He yelled in frustration and stopped the car. I took my chance and ran into the woods, hiding behind some bushes. He came after me with a flashlight. Twice, he shined it right over me without seeing me. Finally, I heard his footsteps getting further away, so I ran back to his truck. Unfortunately, he had locked it. Then, I saw another car in the distance. I ran out into the middle of the road, waving my arms wildly. The car tried to avoid me, but I wouldn't let them. They stopped, and I yelled for help. When I told them I'd been kidnapped by the guy in the Ford Explorer, the driver agreed to take me home. I was safe, and I couldn't thank the driver enough. I woke up my parents and told them what happened. My dad asked if I got the license plate number, and I felt like punching myself. I hadn't even thought to do that. All I knew was he drove a faded blue '99 Ford Explorer. I gave Alex a piece of my mind, and I've held a grudge against him ever since for leaving me at that party without telling me anything. I haven't seen him in 4 years, and this was actually the first time I'd thought about the incident in almost a year. I guess even the worst memories fade with time, but now that I've written about it, it's all fresh again. Thanks for listening, and be sure to check out the video I made with about horrific hitchhiking murders on my channel. You can click on the screen now or check out the description below. And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's next. You.